All right, so you should have already read chapters 46 through 51. I hope you did. Didn't we leave off at 45 with Mosley, the pharmacist? No? You left off on 44 with Vardaman? Yeah. Okay. So y'all need to just talk about that chapter then. All right, that's no big deal. Chapter 45 is Mosley, and chapter 44 is Vardaman. Did we finish talking about chapter 44? The Vardaman chapter? No? This is the one where he is interested in the buzzards and, you know, where they go at night and what they do. All right? Do y'all recall?
Oh. Did we go?
I thought we did. Because we noticed that he says that there's 7 of them and then there's 7 Bundrins, and we previously talked about how the buzzards kind of symbolize the Bundrin family.
I think that's the last thing we said.
Is that the last thing we said? All right, so a couple of things just that I want to point out about this Vardaman chapter. Not too much. He's very interested in where the buzzards go at night. All right? We know the buzzards are there because Addie's body is rotting. It's been 8 days. They don't have, you know, the embalming fluids or anything like that they've used. This is a homemade casket. All right? I also want you to note that Cash, you know, he's got this broken leg. He's been laying on top of this casket that he built for his mother, and he is really suffering in silence. You know, he is not complaining at all. He's like, it doesn't bother me any, you know, it's really no big deal. When you know it's hurting, you know, he's riding in this bumpy wagon, so I'm sure he's feeling like every bump as he goes over it. I broke my rib once, and like every time I spoke or every time I took a breath, it hurt. You know, so imagine a badly broken leg. How bad that's hurting as they're moving over the bumps in this wagon. But he's like, nope, it doesn't bother. All right, and so he continues on, and we have another reference to the buzzards here. I don't know why this thing does this. We're there. Another reference to, now there's 10 buzzards in little tall black circles on the sky. So the amount of buzzards that are arriving are increasing. All right, in chapter 45, Mosley is, who is Mosley? He is the pharmacist, okay? And he is the pharmacist in this town. And Dewey Dell goes to him, and what is she hoping to get? Yeah, medicine that's going to end her pregnancy. And she goes in, and she's acting very peculiar. You know, she is not being straight with him and saying, this is what I'm here for. You know, he has to kind of pull it out of her. And, you know, he's like, you know, how old are you? You know, are you not regular? Are you too regular? You know, what's the problem? And she was like, yeah. And he was like, no, what's the problem? And he was like, well, which? Don't you know? And he says, do you want something to stop it? And she was like, no, it's already stopped. Talking about her menstrual cycle. All right. Well, what? Her face was lowered a little. You're not married, are you? I said, no. And how long has it been since it stopped? About 5 months. And she says, no, it's just been 2. So that kind of clarifies to us the section where she's talking about how she has something in her, but she doesn't feel it yet, you know, because it's just 2 months. All right, so he goes ahead and he's like, look, I don't do that. You know, take your money, go get married. You know, I'm a good man. I've, you know, been in business for 56 years. I've raised my family here in church, and that's not the kind of thing that I offer here. You'd best be served by going and telling your dad what has happened and marrying this boy. All right? Well, while he is talking to her, while she is there, they are arguing with people in town about the smell that's coming off of this coffin. All right? And so kind of the sheriff has come up, and, you know, the sheriff is relaying some of this information to them. You know, y'all, this is bad. You got to get it out. You know, people, you know, don't need this in the middle of town. They've got this rickety wagon. It's going to fall off. You know, they've got this woman in a box. She's been dead 8 days. They've got another guy with a broken leg laying on top. You know, it's absurd. The whole thing is absolutely absurd. It's almost comedic. And then we find out that they are looking to purchase some cement because they want to put it on Cash's broken leg. Because that sounds like a great idea, right? All right. And so the sheriff is like, that is not a good idea, the marshal. He's like, you'll kill him. You'll cause him to lose his leg. You take him to the doctor and you get this thing buried as soon as you can. Don't you know you're liable to jail for endangering the public health? Okay. So, he's saying, look, this is more than absurd. You're endangering the health of the people around. This is not cool. You need to get on about your way, get this thing buried, get this guy to a doctor. And they kind of continue talking, and they're like, well, are they gone? And he's like, I reckon they are. And they're like, good, because we don't want them hanging around here. And so that was the Mosley chapter, the chapter of the pharmacist. So he relays his strange encounter with Dewey Dale, and then he relays information that someone told him about what was going on in town while he was talking to Dewey Dale in the actual drugstore or the pharmacy. All right, does that make sense to you guys? Mm-hmm. So the next question is, while Mosley is talking to Dewey Dale, what other activities are the Bundrens up to in town? They're arguing with a man over the leg and the smell, and they're trying to get some cement because they think it's a great idea to put some concrete or some cement on Cash's leg. Because they're crazy. That's just a bad idea. All right, so in chapter 46, we have Darrell, and I have highlighted a couple of areas that I think are important. Okay? So the first thing that they're talking about is they need to obtain some water because they need the water to make the cement. All right? And Paul says, well, I wouldn't be beholden, God knows, because they're talking about borrowing someone's bucket so that they can get water. And this is irony because we know he does not have any trouble being beholden or, owing someone back for something that they have done for him. He is totally okay with that. All right? So then we see that Dewey Dale, she gets down from the wagon. She's still carrying this package. And everybody thinks, what's in this package? Cakes. Those cakes of Coratols. So they're like, you better go ahead and get those cakes sold because, they're not going to be good. All right, so they continue talking about making the cement. They ask Cash, do you want to be lifted down from on top of the coffin? And Cash is like, won't we be in Jefferson tomorrow? He is watching us. He's like, I can last it out. I can wait. It'll be easier on you, Pa says. It'll keep it from rubbing together. I can last it, Cash says. We'll lose time stopping. We done brought the cement now, Pa says. I could last it, Cash says. So we get the idea of what from Cash?
And it's like, we're going to treat him. He's like, no, we don't have to. I'm good. I can last.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's like, this is a bad idea. I don't want cement on me. I can last. I can make it another day. All right? Paul's like, well, we've already bought the cement now, so we might as well use it. All right, and so Cash is still like, it's just one more day. It don't bother me none. And it's got to. All right? All right, so they loosen the splints and they pour cement over his leg.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, watch out for it, Cash says. Don't get none on it if you can help. Don't get none on what? On the coffin. All right? Yes, watch out for it. Don't get none of it. Yes, I say. Dewey Dale tears a piece of paper from the package and wipes the cement from the top of it as it drips from Cash's leg. How does that feel? It feels fine, he says. It's cold. It feels fine. Then we all turn on the wagon and watch him. He is coming up the road behind us, wooden backed, wooden face, moving only from his hips down. He comes up without a word, with his pale, rigid eyes and his high, sullen face, and gets into the wagon. Who is this? Yes, and what has he done? He has sold his horse. Previously he rode off on his horse and he was like, I'm not selling my horse. But now we find out that he has sold his horse for the team of mules. All right, so in chapter 47, we have Vardaman. And he tells us a couple of things. He confirms that Jewel hasn't got a horse anymore. So if you missed that, he confirms it, that he did trade in his horse. All right. He says, we fixed Cash's leg. These are my brothers. He's still talking about the buzzards, and he's still wondering, where on earth do these buzzards go at night? Where do they go at night? I'm curious. I need to know this. All right. Then he has a moment where he talks about seeing what? The train when he gets to town. And then he says, tonight, I'm going to see where they stay. I'm going to find out. So his plan is, when everybody goes to sleep, I'm going to go find out where those buzzards are. So what does Vardaman want to find out in this section? Where do the buzzards go at night? All right, so Darrell's still messing with Jewel, and he's like, hey, Jewel, whose son are you? So he's getting a little bit more direct. All right, so the breeze was setting up from the barn, so he put her under the apple tree, where the moonlight can dapple the apple tree upon the long slumbering flanks within which now and then she talks in little trickling bursts of secret and murmurous bubbling. Is she really talking? Is there possibly some noises coming from the coffin? Possibly. Yeah. I took Vardaman to listen. When we came up, the cat leapt down from it and flicked away with silver claw and silver eye into the shadows. So the cat's like checking her out. All right, and then he says, hey, your mother was a horse, but who was your father, Jewel? Huh? All right, and then, of course, Jewel, he curses him because that's how Jewel, does. All right, so then he talks about Cash a little, and he says, his leg is getting hot because it's in cement. And Darrell says they poured some water over it. His leg and foot below the cement looked like they had been boiled. So it's not looking good, right? And then Cash is like, I'm obliged, it feels fine, because that's how Cash is. Okay, so in chapter 48 here, what does Darrell do that irritates Jewel? Yeah, he asks, who's your father? He's getting a little bit more direct.
Wait, who asked him that?
Darrell. All right, Vardaman. A lot's happening in this section. All right, so he's still talking about how they can hear Addie inside the wood. And Darrell tells us, or Vardaman tells us, that Darrell says that she's talking to God. She's calling on him to help her. And Vardaman says, what does she want him to do, I say? And Darrell says she wants him to hide her away from the sight of man. So what is Darrell plotting here? We've got to do something. This is ridiculous. She's been dead for 8 days. She's smelling. We're making a mockery of her life through how we're treating her in her death. We've got to do something.
But isn't that what she wanted for them to have to do?
Yes. But Darrell, he has this kind of like rational understanding that it's still wrong. All right, why does she want to hide her away from the sight of man, Darrell? So she can lay down her life, Darrell says. So he's like, she's done. She wants to lay down her life now. All right? And so they talk about that. They leave her alone. And then Vardaman says, and I saw something Dewey Dell told me not to tell nobody. What did he see? Yeah, he saw Darrell setting the barn on fire.
Did Addie tell him to do it?
Huh?
Did Addie tell him to do it?
In his mind. And so he continues on, and I saw something Dewey Dell told me not to tell nobody. It's not about Pa, and it's not about Cash, and it's not about Jewel, and it's not about Dewey Dell, and it's not about me. And so that only leaves Darrell. All right, so Dewey Dell and I are going to sleep on the pallet. It's on the back porch where we can see the barn. And the moon shines on half of the pallet, and we will lie half in the white and half in the black. So he's talking about what, they're sleeping on this back porch. They're not sleeping in the barn. When she goes to sleep, he's going to get up and he's going to go see where these buzzards stay at night. Okay? And so I am going to know where they stay at night soon. They come around the house, going across the yard in the moon, carrying her on their shoulders. Who are they carrying? Addie. They're putting her where? In the barn. They carry her down to the barn, the moon shining flat and quiet on her. Then they come back and go into the house again. While they were in the moon, Mr. Gillespie's boy's leg fuzzed. And then I waited and I said, Dewey Dell, to see if she's going to respond. And then I waited, and then I went to find where they stay at night, and I saw something that Dewey Dale told me not to tell nobody. So when Vardaman gets up in the night, he goes to see where the buzzards are staying, and he sees Darrell setting the barn on fire. All right, so in this chapter 49, what are Darrell and Vardaman doing at the beginning of this section? Listening to Addie. All right, when the coffin is moved to the barn, what does Vardaman do? He goes to see where the buzzards are at night. And what does he see as a result? Darrell lighting the barn on fire.
Hey, Matthew.
All right, so in chapter 50 with Darrell, all right, so what is going on in this section in chapter 50? Huh? The barn is on fire. And so what are the first things that they are trying to do? Get the animals out. Who is primarily working to get the animals out? Jewel. All right, so Jewel's working to get the animals out. It's like Darrell's kind of like, giving them advice, telling them what to do, put the nightshirt over the horse's heads, the mule's head, so it, can't see the fire, so it won't be frightened, so it will leave. Darrell busts a hole through the back wall with the milking stool to get the cow out. The barn is just really just going up fast. All right. Jewel, Dewey Dale cries, Jewel. It seems to me that I now hear the accumulation of her voice through the last 5 minutes. And I hear her scuffling and struggling as Pa and Mac hold her, screaming, Jewel, Jewel. But he is no longer looking at us. We see his shoulders strain as he upends the coffin and slides it single-handed from the sawhorses. Why is Dewey Dale screaming at him?
He's going in there to get Addie.
Yeah, because he's going back into the burning barn to get Addie. And she's just like, don't do it, don't do it. All right, we see his shoulders strain as he upends the coffin and slides it single-handed from the sawhorses. It looms unbelievably tall, hiding him. I would not have believed that Addie Bundren would have needed that much room to lie comfortable in. For another instant, it stands upright while the sparks rain on it in scattering bursts as though they engendered other sparks from the contact. Then it topples forward, gaining momentum, revealing Jewel and the sparks raining on him too in engendering gusts, so that he appears to be enclosed in a thin nimbus of fire. Without stopping, it overends and rears again, pauses, then crashes slowly forward and through the curtain. This time, Jewel is riding upon it, clinging to it, until it crashes down and flings him forward and clear, and Mac leaps forward into a thin smell of scorching meat, and slaps at the widening crimson-edged holes that bloom like flowers in his undershirt. Okay, so what action is going on in this section? Yeah, the barn is on fire. And who managed to save the coffin? What happens to him? He's burned. Okay, so here we are with Vardaman in chapter 51, which is where I told you guys to kind of read to. Vardaman is reiterating that he went to see where the buzzards stay at night, and he saw something, and they carried Addie back under the apple tree. The barn is still red, but it's not a barn now. All right, so it's burned, and it's still kind of glowing. Cash is still awake. He turned his head from side to side with sweat on his face. Do you want more water on it, Cash? Dewey Dale said. Cash's leg and foot turned black. All right, so the cement is, really damaging him. All right. So Gillespie's like, why on earth did you do that? And Pa was like, I thought it would steady it some. I just aimed to help him. They got the flat iron and the hammer. Dewey Dale held the lamp. They had to hit it hard, and then Cash went to sleep. He passed out. What are they doing?
Trying to break the cement.
Yep. He's asleep now. I said it can't hurt him while he's asleep. It just cracked. It wouldn't come off. It'll take the hide too, Mr. Gillespie said. What's the hide?
The skin.
Why in the tarnation you put it on there? Didn't none of you think to grease his leg first? I just aimed to help him, Pa said. It was Darl put it on. Where is Darl? They said. Didn't none of you have more sense than that? Mr. Gillespie said. I thought he would anyway, Darl. Joel was lying on his face. His back was red. Dewey Dale put medicine on it. The medicine was made out of butter and soot to draw out the fire. Then his whole back was black. So they got one whose leg is in a bad way, all right? And then we got one whose back is burned up, all right? So where's Darl, they asked. He is out there under the apple tree with her, lying on her. So he's lying on top of this coffin with this body in it that's been dead for days. He is out there so the cat won't come back, I said. Are you going to keep the cat away, Darl? The moonlight dappled on him, too. On her it was still, but on Darl it dappled up and down. You needn't cry, I said. Joel got her out. You needn't to cry, Darl. All right, so this is kind of a neat image. The moonlight dappled on him. On her it was still, but on Darl it dappled up and down because he's moving. So like the light that's coming through the leaves is moving on him, and he's moving because he's crying. All right, and he says, you don't need to cry. Joel got her out. You don't need to cry, but we know Darl's crying. Why? Yeah, he wanted her to be burned. You know, he wanted to end this, but it's not over. Okay? So what's going on with Cash's leg in this section? Yep. It's turning black, and they're trying to bust the cement off. It's terrible. What happened to Joel's back? It was burned. What is Darl doing? Crying. What are possible reasons for Darl's actions? Yeah, he wants to end this. All right, so we previously talked about how this is a Southern Gothic novel, all right, and that we have elements of the grotesque. What are some of the elements of the grotesque that we have seen? Huh? All right, the coffin and the flood, and the fact that they decided to cross the river anyway. What else? Bartleman drilling holes, the buzzards. What else? What about Cash building the coffin out of the window where she can see it? When we actually meet Addie, you know, she is definitely atypical. She is not your stereotypical character. You know, she's different. What about the cement on the leg? The fact that Cash really only seems concerned about his tools even though his leg is badly broken. The fact that the father decides that it's a good idea to put the cement on the leg. The selling of Joel's horse. You know, the whole thing is a farce. It's just ridiculous. You know, and the fact that Addie, they're still toting her around after 8 days, just trying to get, you know, miles that we could walk in one day. You know, we could get up and we could walk this distance in a day. So, you know, it really just kind of shows how nonsensical that this Odyssey is. It's like just a farce, really. All right. So it's comedic in a way that these people think that all of these actions that they are doing are, you know, good ideas. Did y'all see that? Okay. By tomorrow, you have 2 things you need to do. What is the first big thing? The essay. And the second thing is, I want you to finish reading this.
The whole thing?
Yeah. It's not much longer. And you have 15 minutes that you can be reading right now. Y'all, you can read this in 15 minutes. All right. So I want you to go ahead and finish this. Word.